What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So as this Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard has been ongoing, we've been getting more and more information, specifically from Microsoft trying to convince regulators that it's okay for them to acquire the company, even going as far now as to write Jim Ryan and PlayStation a letter detailing some of their plans for Call of Duty. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about some of the initial sales data for The Last of Us Part 1 on the PS5, and we'll also be going over the Wii U and how it's finally been able to taste success thanks to the Switch. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Playground Games and Fable, as Matt Booty was at PAX West talking about some of the different studios that he oversees as head of Xbox Game Studios. And the big one he really seemed to focus in on was Playground Games. We can see this posted up by IGN, where he says, "Part of my job is giving air cover to the team. They don't want to show stuff early before it's ready to go. But if there's one game where that's kind of flipped around, where every time I see something I say we should show this, it's Fable, because there's a lot of cool stuff. The team, though, has made it very clear that I'm not going to be able to show anything until it's ready." And I mean, Playground Games, I'd like to think that they will sit on this until they believe it is absolutely ready to show, and it's not something that they show again, and oh yeah, it's still another 3 years before it's coming out. I'd rather them hold on to Fable until they're like a year out, and then they start their big marketing push, and they show off gameplay and all of that then. But I will admit I'm very curious to see what they come up with, because even Matt Booty mentions it's a head scratcher to give them Fable because they typically make racing games like Forza Horizon. But hey, sometimes it's a good idea to shake things up a bit here, and well, that's certainly a change, going from like a racing game to this open world action adventure RPG with Fable. Also, with The Last of Us Part 1 now out, of course, people are playing through it, and they're starting to spot some things in the game, specifically an Easter egg that kind of looks like it's hinting towards Naughty Dog's next big game. We can see this posted up by Naughty Dog Central. It says fans are speculating that art in Last of Us 1 are indicative of Naughty Dog's new intellectual property. Seemingly would be a fantasy setting, and basically it's a board where a bunch of like pages out of a book almost are taped up, and yeah, it does look like it'd be more of a fantasy setting for the next intellectual property. That has been rumored, by the way, online, so I guess not too surprising to move to that conclusion. And this isn't unlike Naughty Dog to do, as with Uncharted, there was like a newspaper clipping, as pointed out by PSU, that mentioned an infection, which obviously is hinting towards The Last of Us. So the one thing I will say, though, for Naughty Dog, it's probably not a bad idea for them to move off of The Last of Us for a little while. I know they have their multiplayer coming up, but every time Last of Us comes up online, especially with what happened with Part 2 and that whole debacle, it generally just ends up being a lot of fighting back and forth, a lot of controversy and stuff there. So maybe a new intellectual property they can focus in on would be a good thing for them, once again, to shake things up there. But I guess for now we can look towards their multiplayer, their factions multiplayer, that I assume we'll find out more about, as it's a live service for PlayStation that they're focusing in on, and maybe next year they'll show it. Oh, and here was an interesting bit of news that got out yesterday. That's from Did You Know Gaming, after they showed off some initial concepts for a game that Retro Studios pitched to Nintendo. We know that there had been rumors around Retro Studios doing some sort of like Zelda game that would focus in on Sheik, but it also looks like they had plans for kind of a tactical Zelda game. We can see this posted up over on Go Nintendo. They say the second Zelda idea features 3 different heroes that lived 100 years in the past. The lineup of heroes was a Zora, a Rito, and Goron, and the 3 gathered in order to set out and save Link. Believe it or not, Link ended up getting captured when he set out to save Zelda from Ganon. Somehow 100 years after this ordeal, after Link is rescued, he ends up being an antique shop owner. So there you go. Unfortunately, they decided that that was not going to happen, to be Nintendo, after Retro pitched it to him. So I feel like with Retro Studios, while we don't see a lot of output from them necessarily, I mean, we should see Metroid Prime Remaster, and then we'll get Metroid Prime 4, but I have a feeling a lot of the stuff they pitch or work on gets canceled or just doesn't happen at all. So I'm hoping that Metroid Prime Remastered looks good and people get excited for it, then we can move to Metroid Prime 4, because I would like to see Retro Studios release more games. So here's hoping we can get things started with Prime Remaster and then roll into Prime for, I don't know, maybe next year. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard, which was a massive story when it was announced, and it continues to be a pretty big story overall. We all assume that it's going to get done and the deal will close most likely next year, but there have been several snags in the process, specifically for Microsoft, as regulators all over the world continue to look more and more into the entire deal. And we're starting to hear more from even Phil Spencer, as this was a statement to The Verge. We can see this posted up. This from Phil Spencer saying, in January, we provided a signed agreement to Sony to guarantee Call of Duty on PlayStation with feature and content parity for at least several more years beyond the current Sony contract, an offer that goes well beyond typical gaming industry agreement. So that's the biggest thing here. That's what Sony seems very concerned about, is Call of Duty. And it's hard to blame them. Call of Duty makes a lot of money for Sony, and then beyond just the revenue that it makes, it helps them sell systems because they have the marketing deals with Activision, which the Call of Duty logo is very powerful. As we've seen, like Microsoft had it with the 360, and that was like the de facto system for a while there for Call of Duty. Then Sony got the marketing deals, and it kind of shifted over to the PS4. So yeah, wherever that marketing goes is just about as important as that 30% cut that these companies get from the store with the microtransactions and the game itself selling. So Sony will undoubtedly lose that when their deal runs up. They have about 2 years left on that, as reported by Bloomberg. So it will definitely be there for the next couple of years. Now, Microsoft is using verbiage like several years, and that's anyone's guess. I assume the actual like papers that Microsoft sent over that are signed and all this goes a bit more into detail as to how long. And this, I think, is just Phil Spencer putting more and more goodwill out there for regulators, saying, hey, we're going to play nice. You don't have to worry about that. We're good. We can go ahead and acquire Activision Blizzard, right? I think we're going to have regulators still come back and have Microsoft sign and give up a few things here. And one of those will be the idea of pulling Call of Duty anytime soon. Now, it can't be forever. Like, eventually Microsoft will, like 10 years from now, I'm sure it could be like, hey, we said for the PlayStation 5 specifically. Well, now the PS6 is out, so it doesn't have to be there. But again, who knows what the future holds at this point, 10 or 20 years down the line. But one thing's for sure, at least in the short term, it sounds like Call of Duty will be staying put on the PlayStation platform. Next up, let's talk about the UK sales charts. This gives us our first indication as to how things are going for The Last of Us Part 1, which, once again, a lot of controversy around Last of Us with that $70 price tag, and it mostly being a remake focusing in on the visuals and presentation of the game, which are very good, but then it's like $70 for that, and that's kind of where the back and forth has come in. Well, we can see the top 10 for the UK, starting with, yes, The Last of Us Part 1, and then at number 2, Horizon Forbidden West, which continues to hold firm actually there at 2. A lot of that does have to do with Horizon Forbidden West, I'm sure, being bundled in with PS5, so you buy a PS5, you're also getting Horizon Forbidden West. But look at this, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga Collection, coming in at number 3. I think that's actually really good overall for the Cowabunga Collection, which is a really good collection. It has a lot of solid titles in there from like the 16-bit era and all of this, and the arcades. F1 Manager 2022, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Saints Row had like an 80% drop, which... well, that's actually good. And then Nintendo Switch Sports at 7, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga at 8, then we finish up with Legends Arceus and Animal Crossing New Horizons. GamesIndustry.biz did have a bit more information to go along with the top 10, talking about The Last of Us Part 1, saying it sold around half the number of copies that Saints Row managed when it debuted at number 1 last week. That said, you do have to remember that Saints Row came out on a Tuesday, Last of Us came out on a Friday, so there's a few more days thrown in there for Saints Row. And you also have to remember, Saints Row came out on a bunch of systems. Last of Us Part 1 just came out on the PS5. Eventually, it will release on the PC, but for now, they just released it on one system. These are physical sales across the board as well, so you have to kind of take all that into account. I think for the most part, this this is about right for Last of Us Part 1. It's not a new game, it's a remake, so if you've played The Last of Us, you might be kind of juggling it, thinking, I'll hold on to that $70 and maybe I'll put it towards God of War Ragnarok when that comes out in November, or since we are starting to get into release season for the holidays, there are a lot of games that are starting to pile up right in front of us, so I get why people may hold off on that and even look for a sale down the road. Who knows? When we get towards like the holiday season right at the end of November, it could be like 30% off or something, and then maybe people buy in at that time. But I will say the game itself, it's good. It's just like, is it that necessary right now? If you're a big Last of Us fan, you've probably already bought it. If you're not, you're probably weighing your options. In that case, I would kind of hold off until you see a sale that makes more sense. But at least in the UK, it's off to a decent start. I'll be curious to see how it does in things like the NPD sales charts. We won't find out about that, though, for about another month. Next up, let's talk about how the Wii U's finally tasted success. I had to put this story in here because it really reminded me of some of the old days of repairing the original Wii, which we'll talk about why in a second here. But first, we can see this posted up over on Twitter. This was shared around a lot, by the way, where they say, I opened up a Wii U in order to remove some Switch games from the disk drive. Yes, you heard correctly. The console owner's son stuck a bunch of Switch games in there. So you see what I'm saying? Look, it's tasting success. The Switch games are inside the... Yeah, okay. But this was actually a pretty common thing. Now, they also show off, Jose Cruz does here, that the Wii U worked after pulling the cartridges out. And the slot loading mechanism for the Wii had the same issue. I would pull all kinds of stuff out of the Wii when it would come in for repair. Like mom or dad would bring in the Wii and they're like, I don't know why this doesn't work, but it's not taking the disc in. Sure enough, I opened the Wii up and there are things like, let's see, popsicle sticks, Legos, wheels to like little toy cars, those would be in there a lot, and DS games. DS games were always in these things. It was constant. I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? It makes sense if you're a younger kid and you have this Nintendo system up here, and then you have a Nintendo system you're holding or using. Well, if I take this game and put it in that console, maybe it'll work on the TV. So you kind of see the 7 or 8 year old logic there, right? But it's something that was pretty common. I just thought it was funny when it popped up online. So I'm curious if this has happened to any of you, whether you're a parent and you had kids that jam stuff into, technically it could be even like your Xbox or your PS4. Those happen too. I remember it being much more common with the Wii, so yeah, it seems like this is still a thing just with the Wii U and the Switch. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a big AAA game that is apparently coming out next year for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which we just saw the Cowabunga collection come in at number 3 on the UK sales charts. It seems like Shredder's Revenge was very well received, so I guess maybe Paramount's gonna take a shot at the game series next year in a much larger game, at least when it comes to the budget. We can see this posted up by Game Rant. Says the announcement is found in the September issue of Toy World in an official update from Paramount, who does own the Nickelodeon and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles license. There are big plans for TMNT in 2023, which includes a brand new AAA video game to be released. And this is not just like an announcement of the game existing. Apparently they're launching it next year, which, well, okay, that's pretty quick. I guess that means there are plans to show this thing off in the next couple of months. Like, is this something we could see in first quarter of 2023 and then they set it up for a holiday release for 2023? And I'm also curious what exactly they mean by AAA, because that meaning gets thrown around a lot, and then we'll see. I think the budgets are just all over the place, and what one company thinks of AAA is what another company thinks of like AA. Are they looking for like the Last of Us budget? Or are they looking for like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutants in Manhattan? You remember that game in 2016 where Platinum Games made it, and it came out and it wasn't well received at all? I'm trying to think of the last larger Ninja Turtles game that I remember playing it. I know there were some on the 360, and there was like one that I believe people were really pointing at as like, okay, this was a good game. But otherwise, me personally, I have to go back to like the PS2, the Xbox, and the GameCube generation where there were Turtles games that were at least up there in terms of quality with what was around it. It just doesn't seem like recently there has been a big 3D Turtles game. So hey, maybe this one's been in development for a little while now and they show it and it just really surprises and impresses us. We'll see. I guess technically it can't be any worse than Mutants in Manhattan because that game got absolutely crushed by reviewers in 2016. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked which of these announced games from Microsoft comes out first. Wow, Fable was leading the pack there at 35%. Avowed and Perfect Dark about even. I think Avowed, a lot of people look at that as something that's coming out anytime now because we saw more of that than anything else on this list, but it sounds like there were some issues with Avowed and development behind the scenes, so we'll see about that one. And then correctly, Everwild only at 5%. They apparently didn't even know what the concept was when they announced it, so it's an interesting way to introduce a game. But Fable at 35%, I think I'm going to agree with the poll here, only because I feel like Playground Games at least has everything together with their studio. I mean, we see Crystal Dynamics having to come in to help out the initiative to get Perfect Dark at least moving along, which Crystal Dynamics is very competent overall, I would say, to make a game like Perfect Dark. But Playground Games, while it is a new concept for them with Fable compared to racing games, I mean, they get those Forza Horizon games out, don't they? So I feel like internally their workflow and stuff is probably the best out of these different studios here. So I'm going to go with Fable. I feel like that is probably next up, but I guess we'll see, especially going into 2023 when most of us believe that Microsoft's finally going to get things on track with these new studios they've purchased. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Reed saying, I feel like it'll be really tough to recapture the feeling of Silent Hill with any kind of remake. Hopefully it ends up being something special though. And I mean, a lot of us look back on Silent Hill 2. I'm not like a huge Silent Hill person, but I even remember that game when it came out on the PlayStation 2. It did kind of it raised the bar when it came to horror games, kind of the psychological stuff in these titles. And I'm sure they can bring it up, remake it, and have it look really nice for modern systems and all these different things. And you can also work in the idea of 3D audio and like the DualSense controller and other ways to immerse you, but I don't think you'll ever get back that moment in time during that generation of systems. So I'm really hoping that they are able to do a bit more than just a remake. Could they do a reimagining with the title? I don't know. It's hard to say, but one thing's for sure, it seems like Konami is going all out with Silent Hill right now. A Silent Hill 2 remake. There are also talks about there being another Silent Hill and then like a spin-off, and they're all over the place right now, and I'm very curious to see how these games look when they're finally ready to show it. I mean, maybe that's something they really do have set up, at least one of these announcements for Tokyo Game Show. We'll see. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. There was the Wii U finally tasting success with Switch cartridges going in the drive. Has something like that happened to you before? And then also, what about a AAA TMNT game for 2023? And then Microsoft writing Sony a letter saying they're planning to keep Call of Duty on the PlayStation for the next several years. But how long is several really? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.